Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
He needs care and treatment.
You are now listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Daryl May of Trustee Properties on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Is this a great country or what?
Locking down the middle of the day. Live from downtown Baton Rouge. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from our studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Means we're brought to you by Daryl May of Trustee Properties. Jacob Beck, Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Fired up, you're here with us. Got all our Tuesday regulars all lined up. Glen West with us in 30 minutes talking Tigers. Colin Jeter, former LSU tight end, and now with the LSU Alumni Association here at 2 o'clock. And we'll chat with Sharif Ishak about the Saints coming up at 2:30. I want to talk about the Saints and their penalties. We're going to get to some of that in the second segment here today. The Oklahoma State Cowboys have parted ways with Mike Gundy, or so their release says. He was fired. We'll talk briefly about that as well. And I've also got some overarching thoughts on the LSU and Ole Miss rivalry through the years. Obviously, we found out that LSU and Ole Miss are going to continue through the next 4 years. So I want to talk a little bit about that as we kind of ease into Tigers and Rebels this week. So let's crank it up the way we do every day. Let's with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
So we found out yesterday that Caden Durham's ankle injury is something that LSU is going to be monitoring all week. We didn't have a lot of information on Saturday night. As I've mentioned, I don't even know that I noticed it happening on Saturday as I was in the press box. It wasn't one of those deals where the training staff went out there for 5 minutes and he gimped off notably. I didn't make a note that he'd gone to the injury tent. I don't even really know when the play happened. I haven't gone back to watch that, but it's irrelevant. We know what the situation is with Caden Durham and that he is day-to-day this week with call it a low ankle sprain, just not a high ankle sprain. And so the next thought that comes to my mind is, okay, what if he can't play? Because if he can play, then he will play and he'll be your starting running back and you'll kind of use the rotation that you've used thus far. But if he can't play, you've got some very, very unproven depth that you're going to have to tap into with this LSU backfield. Last year, Caden Durham led LSU in carries. He had 140 on the season. Josh Williams had 117. Put together, that's 257 of LSU's 373 carries. More succinctly put for radio, for not numbers, those two combined for 70% of LSU's carries last year. So you realize that Williams is with the Buccaneers now and he's moved on. And then you look at Caden Durham this year. He's got 52 carries. Second place on that list is Juwan Johnson at 16. The drop-off from 52 to 16 is a long way. So Caden Durham is your only proven running back. You've got Caleb Jackson, who's now a junior, who has not really done anything. Over the last 2 seasons, he's got 50 carries with a long of 12 yards. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since the ReliaQuest Bowl when Garrett Nussmeier made his first start. So he hasn't been productive at all and hasn't really been given an opportunity to be that. Juwan Johnson has played 3 different positions at LSU, and Harlem Berry has played 4 games. And if you take the 2 stiffest competitors that LSU's played against, with Clemson and Florida, he's got 3 carries for 3 yards. So you haven't played any of these guys a significant amount. One thing that Caden Durham brings to the table that we know, is he's very good at breaking tackles. And it's something that this offense, quite frankly, requires the running back to do. Y'all have watched this group run block. You watched them run block last year. That group moved on. You've watched this group run block for 4 games. You're going to have to break some tackles to run the football. And Caden Durham, so far this year, has forced 6 missed tackles. Next best on the roster is 2, Michael Van Buren and Juwan Johnson. But also, furthermore, Caden Durham has gained 151 of his 213 yards after contact, 71% of Caden Durham's yardage this year has come after contact. And while I've watched Juwan Johnson's high school highlights and he ran for 4,000 yards in high school, he ran for an absurd total of touchdowns for a running quarterback in high school. He hasn't done this. And Harlem Berry was an elite high school back, number 1 in the country. But he hasn't played at this level, at this speed, with this workload before. So you're missing a key piece to the weak link in your offense. LSU's running game is not going to be asked to carry it in Oxford. Not going to be asked to carry the team against South Carolina or Alabama or Oklahoma. But you've got to have something. And while Caden Durham hasn't been great, he gives you something. He can. The first play of the game against Clemson, we've mentioned this many times. LSU didn't block it worth a flip. He got 25 yards. Last year in Columbia, South Carolina, LSU's offensive line was okay, but Durham broke 7 tackles that day. He gives you something, and this is an Ole Miss defense that has been atrocious against the run. Ole Miss, there's 136 teams in the FBS, 136. Ole Miss is 122nd in yards per game allowed on the ground. They're 121st in yards per carry allowed. And they haven't faced the 2012 Alabama team with Eddie Lacy in the backfield behind all pros. They faced Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane. Like, not elite teams. Arkansas's got a potent offense, but this Ole Miss running game has been terrible. Running defense has been terrible. But LSU's ground game has been bad too. 112th in the country in yards per game, 109th in yards per carry, 106th in attempts per game. They don't run the ball a lot. But they've got to try to run the ball against this Ole Miss team. So how do they do it? Well, here's my guess. This is my opinion. And this is if Durham doesn't play. If Durham plays, this conversation's moot. But it's Tuesday, and we've got a lot to talk about in this game, and we'll get more information as the week goes on. But LSU's got to practice for the first couple of days as if Durham may not be available. So who are you giving reps to? My opinion, I think that they've lost confidence that Caleb Jackson's going to be an effective SEC running back. That's my opinion. The carry count would bear that out. I think, based on what you saw on Saturday when Durham came out of the game, Juwan Johnson got the biggest share of the workload. And I think he will be your starting running back on Saturday if Caden Durham can't go. Now, Johnson looks the part. Like, you say, oh, well, he's a safety. Oh, he's a quarterback. Like, can he handle the... He's 6 feet tall and 210 pounds. Like, he's like 15 pounds lighter than Caleb Jackson. But he's put together and looks the part of an SEC running back. He didn't look like Trent Richardson, but he looks like an SEC running back. He looks like John Emery. Logan Diggs is there for Ole Miss. He looks like him. He looks like a solid SEC running back. And I have very little doubt that given space, he can run the football. He's been doing that his whole life. I talked about this in the story that I wrote at LouisianaSports.net. Like, he was playing safety last year for 2 weeks. And then John Emery tore his ACL. And then on Monday, they said, okay, go play running back. And on Saturday, he caught a touchdown pass. So, like, he can do some of these things in space. Is he as capable as Durham? I would suggest no, but I'd love to be proven wrong. I think Johnson starts. I think Harlem Berry, this isn't a guess on my part, is given a package of plays that he feels really comfortable about. I don't know what Harlem Berry feels best about right now. Could be zone where he can kind of string the play out and cut it up the field when it's open. It might be the screen game where he's most comfortable creating a little bit of space for him. It might be with a fullback behind him. Like, who knows? I don't know what Harlem Berry is most comfortable with, but I would suggest they probably get him some reps this week doing the things he's most comfortable with, understanding they'll go to those when it's his turn to get into the game to give Juwan Johnson a breather, and the game flow dictates it. I think Caleb Jackson plays a little bit. I don't think he plays a lot. And then this is the biggest X factor that I think you see a dramatic uptick here. Xavier Thomas. I think you see Xavier Thomas in the backfield a lot. Now, here's the deal with, let me talk about Xavier Thomas first, and then I'll go big picture. Xavier Thomas can carry the football in the SEC comfortably from the shotgun in the read option game. Like he can do that. Give him 3 practices to work on it. He is comfortable putting the ball under his arm, making guys miss, getting to the edge, outrunning folks. Like he'll take a hit in the middle of the field. Like he's big, strong. He's a fourth-year college player. He's got a man's body on him. Like he's ready to go. And you're going to see him carry the football. I bet he carries the ball 6, 8, 10 times. Like I really think that is going to happen. And I think he'll line up in the backfield a lot. You can get Barryon Brown involved in the jet sweep game as well if you want to test the edges and make sure that Ole Miss can't just completely lay back in a shell. You're going to get creative in the things that you do. I don't think your game plan is going to look exactly the way it would look with Caden Durham back there. I don't think LSU changes anything on defense when Gabe Relaford is not able to play. I don't think LSU changed a lot on defense when Whit Weeks was ejected against Florida. There are spots on the field where I don't think you change a lot of what you're doing. Some, maybe, but not a lot. I think you change a lot of what you're doing without Caden Durham because you just have guys with very, very different skill sets. But here's something that's very important to consider when you think about the running backs and who's playing and when they're playing and how often they're playing. Right at or near the top of the list and what LSU must have from its running back on Saturday, I would suggest one is probably ball security. If you're prone to fumbling, you can't play. But beyond that, even more so than making guys miss in the hole, more so than home run hitting ability, more so than making great catches out of the backfield, more so than all of those things beyond ball security, if you cannot diagnose blitzes and understand what your pass protection responsibility is, you cannot play. Because LSU behind that offensive line on the road cannot have a running back there in the backfield who doesn't know how to protect its most valuable asset in Garrett Nussmeier. If you cannot do that, you cannot play. And I have no idea how good Juwan Johnson is or isn't at pass protection. Frank Wilson told me in my pregame interview 3 weeks ago that he's good at it because he played quarterback and he understands where the blitzes are coming from and he's got a good aptitude for that. Great, then get him out there. I don't know how well Harlem Berry protects the passer. I don't think he did very much of that last year at St. Martin. That's just my guess. I have no idea how well Caleb Jackson protects the quarterback either. He's certainly big and physical enough to block somebody that's blitzing. I don't know. But I would suggest that'll be a point of emphasis this week to make sure these guys know what they're doing and know what page they're on and know how to protect Garrett Nussmeier, because if you can't do that, you cannot play. So I think for LSU, this is a significant deal if Caden Durham is not able to go. I think that it changes a little bit what you want to do on offense, but I do think they've got athletic enough guys and enough options with a week to prepare that you can put together a running game that should be able to produce something against one of the worst run defenses to this point in all of the FBS. It's just a matter of how good can it be, how effective can it be. That we won't know until we get to Saturday. I would anticipate questionable grades for Caden Durham early the week. You're going to get your first injury report on Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday. We'll see how truthful LSU is on that. You'll know my feeling on the whole thing. I think Lane Kiffin will play the same gamesmanship with his quarterbacks all week. I'm not as concerned with those, but I think that it warrants us talking about it. And LSU would like to have Caden Durham. They don't necessarily have a guy that plugs right in for him, but they've got some options. They've got to make sure everybody's in the right position to succeed. All right, we'll step away. When we come back, Saints have a penalty problem. Whose fault is it? I'll talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Daryl May with Trusty Properties. I'm going to give you Daryl's cell phone number at the end of this read. And if you're looking for land, looking for a condo on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, looking to start that dream of owning your own hunting property, Daryl May of Trusty Properties is the name you need to call. He is licensed in Louisiana, in Mississippi. You want the Felicianas? He's got you covered. You want Point Capee? He's got you covered. You want to go up to Woodville, Mississippi, up to Natchez? He's got you covered. You want to go to Bay St. Louis past Christian over on the Gulf Coast? He's got you covered. If you're looking for land, whether it's a secondary home, a new primary home outside the hustle and bustle, or that hunting property you have always dreamed of, because now hunting season is right upon us, Daryl May has access to the finest and most premium listings in the marketplace. So give him a call. It's 225-268-6915. 225-268-6915. Call Daryl May with Trusty Properties. That's a name you can trust.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Daryl May of Trusty Properties. Looking for land to hunt or build? Call Daryl May at Trusty Properties.
Failure happens to us all, but it's how champions evolve. The only thing that matters from a loss is if you get back up when you fall. You gotta get up.
Glen West be with us talking Tigers 15 minutes from right now. Looking forward to that conversation. Colin Jeter from the LSU Alumni Association, but as you know him very well, former LSU tight end. We'll talk Tigers and Rebs with Colin coming up in 45 minutes. One of the big storylines with the New Orleans Saints through 3 weeks has been the penalties. And there have been a lot of different takes on the matter. And I do think that the conversation is fairly complex. There are a lot of layers to a penalty problem. I think that one of the things that a lot of fans like to do, and one of the things that irritates me most is like very lazy things, and I find this to be a lazy thing, is to suggest, okay, your team has a lot of penalties. Oh, the coach sucks. Penalties, the coaching is terrible. And I think there are cases where the coach does a terrible job because there are penalties that are direct reflections of the coach. I also think there are instances where there are penalties that I'm just not going to blame on the coach. For example, watching the game on Sunday, Brian Brzee headbutts a player and gets a 15-yard penalty. I don't think that's the coach's fault. And I could listen to you give me an argument about how, oh, well, the coach doesn't respect the players. There's no discipline on this team. In my opinion, it is not Kellen Moore's job. It is not Brandon Staley's job to sit these guys down when they're 24, 27, 31, 35 years old and say, hey, guys, let's make sure we don't headbutt anyone on Sundays. That's very obvious. I would suggest you might have that conversation with the 7th grade team, but I would be ticked off if a sophomore in high school headbutted someone on the other team. Much less Brian Brzee, who was in a great college program, played in high-stakes games in college, the highest of stakes games, and has been in the NFL for 3 years. Don't headbutt somebody. That's not the coach's fault to me. When you've got things like that are happening, I'm not going to pin that on Kellen Moore. Now, you look at the fact that only one team in the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings, have been flagged more often pre-snap than the Saints. That's a problem. Now, I'm not going to jump Kellen Moore's case when your right guard is jumping off sides. Like, that's the elementary rule of football. You learn that in flag football in elementary school. You can't move until the ball snapped, and I think that doesn't need to be coached. There are elements of the hard count and those types of things and silent counts on the road, and like there's nuance that goes into it, as we all know. This is football 101. But in the big grand scheme of things, like I don't need false starts, but I'm not going to blame that on the coach. But things like formation penalties, things like too many men, not enough men on the field, those are organizational penalties that should not be happening. And they are happening with the Saints. Holding's going to happen. Pass interference is going to happen. Just is what it is. It's part of playing the game. Face mask, going to happen. Guys are moving fast out there. So I'm not here to tell you that every penalty is a direct reflection on the organization as a whole. But this is a problem for the Saints early on, and they've got to do something to get it better. Now, I'm going to read out the most penalized teams in the NFL and the least penalized teams in the NFL. In both cases, there's one kind of exception to this rule, but the most penalized teams in the NFL are the New Orleans Saints and the Tennessee Titans, who both stink out loud. Then you got the Vikings, who I think are a good team with a very good coach, and they're right there. But then you've got New England, and then you've got the Giants. And while Green Bay's in there, Jacksonville's up next. You got a lot of teams that are not good and bad organizations that are very, very much penalized. A couple of exceptions. I think Minnesota's good. I certainly think Green Bay is good. Go to the flip side of that. Least penalized teams in the NFL. Buffalo, number one. We all think they're very good. I think they got a very good coach. Seattle, right there. Mike McDaniel's fairly new to this head coaching thing, but he comes from the Ravens, first-class organization, and it seems like the Seattle Seahawks are pretty well coached. And you got Pittsburgh. They're not contending for championships these days. Mike Tomlin, can we agree, pretty good coach. Got those guys organized pretty much every year. They win more games than they lose every year. Okay. Then you got Cincinnati. I could take it or leave it with the Bengals. And then next, Rams, Chargers. We know they have great coaches. So what I'm looking at here, Buffalo, Seattle, Pittsburgh, Rams, Chargers, Ravens, that's the bottom of the NFL. Fewest penalties. Great coaches. I go to the most penalized teams, Titans, we don't know anything. New England, Vrabel, maybe. Giants, disaster. Saints, we don't know, but bad company to be keeping. Jacksonville, okay, first year. Like, a lot more turmoil in those organizations. So I'm gonna zoom out from the one headbutting incident, the one false start, the one disciplinary penalty, like the one play here, there. And if I zoom out way, way deep and just look at it very surface level, the best organizations with the best coaches are not committing penalties, and right now the Saints are committing penalties. I would not even say it's a red flag. It's just something to monitor. As I said yesterday, with the bad Kellen Moore decisions in the first week with the timeouts, and then the ridiculous decisions to kick field goals in the game on Sunday, and now the penalties, there are things that are stacking up that are concerning, that are bad, that I find befuddling. But I'm going to allow 3 games into his head coaching career and into this new era with the Saints for them to see if they can be a lot better in December than they are in September. I'm not going to just skip over it and say it's all sunshine and rainbows and everything's fine and the Saints will be okay. It's going to be a rebuilding year. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to point out the things that I think are terrible. But let's just see if they can get better. A lot of instances around the NFL where you're starting from rock bottom, and trust me, this is rock bottom. When you've got an old roster that has no salary cap flexibility, and your draft picks have stunk, and you've got the least amount of money invested in the quarterback position in any team in the NFL, this is rock bottom. This is the bottom. And it's hard to dig out of that. You watched the Lions last night. That's a damn good football team that's well coached. They lost both their coordinators. They've come out and played well already through 3 weeks, and they go and win on the road in Baltimore. Dan Campbell's start there was atrocious from a wins-loss perspective. Atrocious. He's building a culture. They're getting players in place. They end up making the Goff trade. They hit on draft picks, and they got things rolling. There's nothing to indicate right now that Kellen Moore is going to get this thing rolling in New Orleans the way that Dan Campbell has things going now 3 years in a row in Detroit. But I'm just pointing out the parallel is you started where things were going badly and you were losing a lot of games. It's going to test Kellen Moore if he can, in the midst of now a 3-game losing streak that's going to go to 4 on Sunday, that we'll see what happens with those 2 games in the Dome. But you're going to look up at some point, and the Saints are going to be 2-8, 1-9, 1-10, 2-11, something like that. Can you continue to instill your culture and make sure that the Saints play better in December than they did in September while you're losing a ton of games? That's the challenge this entire coaching staff is going to have. And you hear all the time, well, these players are professionals. They're going to show up to work. And I trust that that's the case right now. But you're going to have to get that done. I'm not here pinning these penalties all on Kellen Moore. But it's just another piece to this puzzle that's not going to set you at ease to look at the trends. We'll see. Saints on the road to Buffalo on Sunday. We'll talk Sharif Ishak about it coming up at the bottom of hour number 2. Tuesday show is brought to you by Daryl May of Trusty Properties. Looking for home out in the country? Call Daryl May of Trusty Properties. Daryl's born and raised here in Baton Rouge, Catholic high grad, big LSU fan. And he decided after decades in Baton Rouge, like, I think I want some space. So he moved out to St. Francisville and has made his home there on some acres. You want 30 acres? You want 300 acres? You want to do what Daryl has done? Contact Daryl May with Trusty Properties. I'll give you a cell phone number, 225-268-6915, 225-268-6915. Daryl May with Trusty Properties, a name you can trust. We'll come back with Glen West next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Daryl May of Trusty Properties. Looking for land to hunt or build? Call Daryl May at Trusty Properties.
Hope your work week's off to a good start. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Chat with Colin Jeter coming up in 25 minutes. Let's talk with Glen West, senior writer over at GOAT 24/7, joins us on Tuesdays. Glen, how are you?
Doing great, Hunt. How about yourself?
We're doing all right. LSU over the weekend takes on Southeastern in a glorified scrimmage. Did you take anything away from the game action on Saturday?
Yeah, I think probably just the fact that Garrett Nussmeier looked to be as in rhythm as we've seen him look really throughout the entire season so far to this point. I think he was throwing the ball really well. Obviously, the ball came off of his hand a lot crisper, with a lot more velocity, I thought, than maybe the first couple weeks of the season. I think he looked very, very clean, very, very sharp, and outside of a couple drops from his receivers was pretty perfect in terms of ball placement and putting the ball where it was supposed to be. So I think that stuff is certainly something that can translate. Obviously, the results and scoring 6 of 7 touchdowns on 7 drives is really impressive and important to do as well. But just I thought the efficiency with which Nussmeier operated. We also saw him take off for a 26-yard gain with his legs, which we haven't seen. That was a career high in rushing for him. So I liked what I saw from him. I think the other part of it is you were kind of able to get out of there relatively healthy. It stinks that it sounds like Gabe Relaford's going to miss at least this week and possibly longer, depending on what happens with his shoulder. But it does sound like you're going to get a lot of these players back, for this game against Ole Miss that maybe you were missing going into that game against Southeastern. So those would probably be a couple of the big bullet point takeaways from last weekend.
Based on the beginning of your answer, how much are you willing to blame Nussmeier's discomfort or injury, lack of practice time for LSU's kind of clunky offensive start to the season?
I think it factors in. I think I don't want to put it all on that because I do think that there are some issues that this offense still has to overcome in the run game in particular, and certainly up front with the offensive line, it wasn't the cleanest performance even on Saturday against Southeastern. But I think from a vertical passing game perspective, you could certainly see LSU be more aggressive last weekend against Southeastern. I think that's something you'll continue to see uptick here in the coming weeks of SEC play. So I think that certainly had a degree to which LSU's offense was maybe a little bit more conservative in that respect. So, but like I said, I think there are other things that are at play with this offense that they have to get corrected here in pretty short order to be successful in the SEC over the next 8 weeks.
As far as the rotation goes on the offensive line, do you think there will be any sort of moving pieces?
It doesn't sound like it. Kelly was asked specifically about Weston Davis yesterday, and he kind of said the coach's answer that we're not really looking to make a move there right now. He's going to be our starting right tackle. I do think it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver their pieces without DJ Chester in the first half. Say what you want about Chester. He's been kind of their swing guy. Yeah. You've seen him take reps at tackle, at guard, at center. He's somebody that's been pretty valuable to this offensive line just from a depth perspective here. And if they're going to be missing DJ Chester for that first half, if somebody were to go down or if there were to be some kind of mixing and matching that LSU wanted to do there, how they would attack that, I think, would be pretty interesting to watch. But it sounds like they're going to keep things, the way that they have been from at least a starting perspective. And I do think, though, if some of these issues continue to crop up, I would imagine the leash is a little bit shorter with some of these O linemen and giving some other guys more reps and more opportunity to maybe prove themselves as part of the starting lineup as well.
Passing game hasn't hummed quite like we thought. Certainly haven't hit the big plays we thought that they might. Had some drops on Saturday as well. Like, what do you think of the receiver rotation at this point and who they really trust?
Yeah, I think there's a clear three of Aaron Anderson, Xavion Thomas, and Barryon Brown. I think those three are pretty cemented into that receiving rotation. I think outside of that, it's pretty much a pick 'em right now. I think the staff really does like Kyle Parker. I think they'd like to get an opportunity to get him more looks in this offense. I think Nick Anderson is the guy they obviously targeted a couple different times down the field against Southeastern this last weekend. Weren't able to really connect with him. I think he was responsible for one or two of those drops, but he's got immense talent. I think he's somebody long-term that you hope can get right and that the offense can really lean into here. And then, of course, the other one is Chris Hilton. I think we all, have seen, the lack of, I guess, production from him so far in these first four games. I think there's opportunity for him to get vertical and for Nussmeier to continue to lean on some of those guys deep down the field as his arm and as he really starts to feel 100% healthy and moving forward with the vertical passing game. So I do think that there's going to be chances, but I do also think that the way that Kelly has talked these last couple weeks, it does sound like they're not going to be overly aggressive and trying to make that vertical passing game work if it's going to come at the expense of maybe putting their defense in a compromising position. That just seems to me the way that he's talked a lot here the last couple of weeks. They understand what they have with this defense, and it's just going to be about getting this offense to be just a little bit more efficient in a lot of different areas. And if they're able to do that, they think they can have some long-term success in conference play. But certainly the vertical passing game is going to have to play a factor. I just don't know how much of a factor they're going to try to enforce it here at least in the short term.
Glen West, Go 24/7 senior writer, is with us looking for team coverage, looking for recruiting coverage. They got you over there at Go 24/7. The defense has played Clemson, who's really struggling on offense, Florida, who is awful on offense. They're going to Oxford to play Lane Kiffin's offense. How do you feel about the defense kind of stepping up in class here?
Yeah, this is going to be one of my favorite matchups of the year just because I think that Blake Baker is one of the best defensive minds in the game right now, and I think Lane Kiffin is obviously shown to be one of the great offensive minds in the country with his consistent approach on the offensive side. So I think this is going to be a great chess match back and forth on Saturday. I'll be very interested to see how LSU dials this thing up from a defensive perspective. I think you'll continue to see them be very aggressive. I would imagine that Ole Miss's offense is also going to be very aggressive, and so how those two forces match from an aggressive standpoint, I asked the question to Kelly yesterday about that actually, and he said that these two guys have seen enough of each other in terms of force going up head to head. Blake Baker obviously went against Ole Miss when he was back at Missouri, and certainly last year as well at LSU. But now I think LSU feels they have the pieces here to really have an impact from a pressure standpoint and getting after the quarterback and certainly slowing the run game down and being more consistent in the secondary as well. I really am intrigued by this matchup from just a pure football fan perspective. I think it's going to be a really fun one to watch.
If I gave you the number 23 for points for Ole Miss, do you think LSU would take that as a defensive output, or do you think they'd rather go play the four quarters?
I think LSU would take that. I think that would be a really good game for this defense because I do think that Ole Miss's offense is going to put up some points. Like the LSU defense has played really, really well so far, and this could be just another feather in the cap game here where they clamp down on Ole Miss's offense and show that they're truly one of the two or three best defenses in the country. But I still think, with that being said, that Ole Miss's offense just is too explosive. Lane Kiffin is too good at his job. And I do think that Ole Miss is going to put up, 20 to 25 points, at minimum here. And I think that would be something the LSU defense would certainly take. I think my question would be kind of in there, are they able to force any turnovers offensively. Like, does the 23 points also come with, an interception or a forced fumble, or maybe special teams also flipping the field once or twice? Like, I think there's going to have to be some of that at play here for this LSU team to go on the road and get a big win. But I think 23 points would be something that the defense and LSU would take, and it would just be on the offense to do its part and show that it's maybe can build off of that performance last week against Southeastern in some positive ways.
Ole Miss's run defense numbers are atrocious. LSU's rushing numbers are similarly atrocious. Do you think the Tigers, with or without Caden Durham, can run the ball a little bit on what's been a porous Ole Miss defensive front?
That's the other big key to this game, right? Is which one of those things breaks? Which does LSU break through and finally have a rushing performance against a quality opponent that is respectable and can help complement the offense, or does Ole Miss's defense finally stand up to an opponent's rushing attack and kind of put the clamps down and make them one-dimensional? I would love to see Juwan Johnson continue to get some expanded looks in this offense. I really loved what he did against Southeastern. I think he just adds another dynamic here to this running attack. And honestly, just the way that whole thing's, kind of shaped out last weekend, it kind of had me thinking like, okay, maybe LSU should not be, handing the ball off to Caden Durham 15, 16 times a game. Maybe they hand it off to him 10 or 11, and then Juwan Johnson another 8 or 9, and make it more of a 50-50 kind of backfield and give both of those guys a good amount of touches, especially now with Durham and his ankle. I would guess right now, this is just an educated guess, that I think Durham plays on Saturday, but certainly I think Juwan Johnson is a guy that they've been able to utilize not only as a rusher, but in the passing game as well, taking some screen passes and getting downfield on the perimeter. I think he's somebody that could maybe open up this run game and make it a little bit more complementary to what LSU's offense wants to do.
Both numbers might be low, but more touches for Harlan Berry or Caleb Jackson on Saturday?
That's a good question. I'll probably go Harlan Berry. I think Harlan has some really good perimeter vision and something that if they are able to get him in open space, he can get down the field, get some first downs, get some chunk yardage here and there if they're able to spring them. But to your point, like, how many touches does that come through? Is it 2 or 3? Is it 4 or 5? Like, I think any kind of role either of those guys plays, it's going to pale in comparison to what I think Caden Durham and Juwan Johnson wind up doing for this team on Saturday.
You've got a lot of wiggle room over the next 4 days because we don't know who's playing quarterback for Ole Miss. We don't know about Caden Durham. There's a lot we don't know. So do you have a lean on who you like early in the week for LSU Ole Miss on Saturday?
Yeah, I haven't really gotten that far yet. I still want to learn kind of a little bit more how Austin Simmons is progressing throughout the week. I think it's going to be tough for LSU to go on the road and win this game, but I do think that the one thing that I will put in LSU's favor is I do think this defense will be able to travel, and I do think that they'll be able to put up a strong performance against this offense for Ole Miss. It's just, does LSU's offense travel and make this a complimentary performance and a complete game for this team? That I still have some reservations about. So if you're asking me right now, I'd probably lean Ole Miss, but I do think that this is very much a pick'em game, and that obviously is reflected in the odds right now.
Yeah, started with LSU favored by 1.5, swung towards Ole Miss for 1.5, 2 points, depending on where you're looking. So right around that pick'em number for LSU on the road at Ole Miss. Want to read about it? You can at Go247. Glen West, senior right over there with us every single Tuesday. Thanks, Glen. Come back and close out our number 1. It's Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. When you think Genesis of Baton Rouge, think luxury. It's a luxury brand of vehicles. But don't immediately, when you think luxury, think way too expensive for me. You don't know until you go look. Everybody's got a different budget in mind with a vehicle. If you're looking for one of the finest, safest cars on the road, it comes with an unbelievable amount of customer service, America's best warranty. All of that is available at Genesis of Baton Rouge. If you're listening to me right now, you probably have not been behind the wheel of a Genesis. It's fairly new. You probably haven't been to Genesis of Baton Rouge. It's fairly new. But if you're in the market for a new vehicle, whether that's this week, next month, next year, and you're on Airline Highway, because that's where a lot of dealerships are, just make one more stop at Pico, right there at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Say, hey, I heard you about y'all on Hunt Show. Love to get behind the wheel. Show me what you got. They're happy to do so. My personal favorite vehicle is the GV80. I'm more of a midsize SUV kind of guy. Depending on what you're looking for, they've got something for you, sedan all the way up to SUV over at Genesis. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Find that entire inventory online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Daryl May of Trustee Properties. Looking for land to hunt or build? Call Daryl May at Trustee Properties.
Closing up hour number one, not necessarily a local story, but I'll kind of tie it back locally a little bit. Oklahoma State made the decision today to fire Mike Gundy. They put in the press release that they decided to part ways. We obviously know that's not the case, as Oklahoma State's just been atrocious the last 2 years. But I don't think the last 13 months, I guess it is, would sully what Mike Gundy did at Oklahoma State. Keep in mind, when we were here in Baton Rouge, it felt like Les Miles was here for an eternity, right? Just here forever. Mike Gundy was hired at the same time as Les Miles because he took over for Les. And he lasted another coach and a half after Les left. A national championship coach and a half after Les left. Mike Gundy, and this is Brett McMurphy tweeted this out, is 58 years old. 35 of those years, so more than half of his life to this point, he has spent at Oklahoma State as a player, assistant, or the head coach. This is pretty amazing. Oklahoma State has had 11 10-win seasons in school history. 11. Mike Gundy was 12 10-win seasons. Mike Gundy was the quarterback for 2 of them and the coach for 9. They've only done it once outside of that. Twice as a quarterback, 9 times as the coach, 1 time outside of that. Mike Gundy did an awesome, awesome job at Oklahoma State. Now, I will not forgive him in a football sense ever for losing that game to Iowa State, because that took a national championship off LSU's trophy case. And he did say years later that he thought that Oklahoma State would have handled LSU rather easily in the Superdome. That's not the case. That LSU team would have dump trucked Oklahoma State to another national championship. It didn't happen, and we know what did happen in the Superdome that fateful January evening. But Oklahoma State is not a program with infinite resources. It had one very wealthy booster who did what he could. Mike Gundy was remarkably consistent in his time there. He had 4 straight winning. Before Gundy, Oklahoma State had 4 winning seasons in 16 years. Gundy had 18 in a row. That's the 9th longest streak in NCAA history for a coach at one school. So he made them relevant. He made them solid. And now we'll see where the Cowboys go from here, because if you remember like what it felt like when Les Miles was fired in Baton Rouge and you thought like, we don't even know what else there is. He feels like he's been here for so long. They had Mike Gundy a lot longer than that at Oklahoma State. It's a new world there where Oklahoma's not in your league. It's an NIL world, and T-Ben Pickens is no longer with us. So it's an interesting situation for them in a spot that they haven't been in a long time. But that's a heck of a job by Mike Gundy, and we'll see what Oklahoma State decides to do moving forward. But it'll be without Mike Gundy for the first time in a very, very long time. We'll see if Mike Gundy ends up on television. A lot of folks who've spent a lot of time with him suggest he'd be very, very good at it. I believe that to be the case as well. He's kind of a live wire when he gets a microphone in front of him. Not just I'm a man, I'm 40, but all the stuff that he's done with a mic in front of him, talking about just player getting a DUI that he hadn't really had that much to drink. I've done that hundreds of times in my life. It's like, well, probably shouldn't say that out loud. But that may be good on TV if you can find a spot for him, whether it's on Fox or on ESPN. He certainly got a lot of cash on hand and doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do. And this has probably got to hurt him significantly, because you spent so much of your life, literally over half, in one spot helping your alma mater, and to have to move on from that's got to be very, very difficult. But if he finds it in his heart to do some television, I think it'd be a good thing. So Mike Gundy out at Oklahoma State after a long, long run that started back in 2005. That's it for hour number one here on a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. We're brought to you by Daryl May of Trustee Properties. He is licensed in Louisiana and Mississippi. You want land, second home, new home, hunting property? agriculture, whatever the case may be. Daryl May can help you out with Trusty Properties. If you missed any of the show, catch it on demand wherever you find your sound. Open the show today talking about what LSU does without Caden Durham at running back. If that's the case on Saturday, we don't know, but it's worth a discussion this early in the week. So I went through that. You can find that online at Hunt on LSU, on YouTube, wherever you find your podcast. Talk about the Saints penalties. How much of that do you pin on Kellen Moore? I think some, but not everything. And I wanted to talk about that, so we did so. You can find that at Hunt on Saints, wherever you find your podcast, and of course, as well on YouTube. Then we had Glen West go 24/7. That you can find at Hunt on LSU moving forward here. Lots to do in hour number 2. Looking very much forward to it. We'll revisit our Saints conversation with Sharif Ishak. We'll also have a discussion about LSU and Ole Miss, this rivalry, what it's meant over the decades, why LSU and Ole Miss have been chosen as permanent opponents, I guess annual opponents, more aptly said, moving forward, and just some thoughts on the last 2 games that these two teams have played that have come down to the last play. We'll do that 20 minutes from now when we come back. Colin Jeter, former LSU tight end, and now with the LSU Alumni Association, will be with us after Sports Center on The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. I was looking at the National Hurricane Service earlier, and they've got pretty violent hurricane out there in the Atlantic right now, but it's going to be, as they call it, a fish storm. Never even gets close to the land. We like those. Those are good. But you always know when you live here in this part of the world, we've got risks that are associated with hurricanes. Do you know that your business is properly protected when it comes to a hurricane? It's not just buying the cheapest policy for the lowest premium. What about your business interruption limit? What if a hurricane blows through and you're just not able to operate for 2 weeks, for a month? If that's the case, is your policy properly written so that you can get paid out, or do you have co-insurance penalties? Do you have insufficient limits? That's the thing that the Highland Insurance Group can help you guard against. Call Jonathan Carbo and his team. They are experts in making sure your policy is written properly. It's the Highland Insurance Group, online at HighlandIG.com. That's HighlandIG.com.